as we move collectively into the new energies, uh, we've got more paths available to us. The paths are just
Mm.
showing. We accepted the story in the past that there were only so many paths
Mm-hmm.
and so
Mm-hmm.
many places to look for the paths, and you don't look off your path for a new one because it's not there or it's the wrong one. Now,
Yeah.
the, those boundaries are being thrown aside,
Yeah.
and
It's
you look in a new direction that you wouldn't have noticed before, and there are millions of paths.
There really is a lot. I'm
Yes,
almost overwhelmed by it.
it's very.
I want to ground in ways that I used to ground, and yet everything is saying don't ground quite yet, buddy.
Mhm.
So,
Well, personally, yeah, I've gotten really stopped with the the information overload that
mm,
I used to live off of that stuff. I wanted to know what was going on.
mm,
It didn't matter what it was. Ben Fulford on Monday.
mm-hmm,
David Wilcock when it came out.
mm-hmm,
Dee if she's putting something out. Heather if she's putting
yeah,
something out. All that stuff. I just wanted it. And now it's like, okay, if I catch something, then that's fine.
mm.
I,
You're
you know,
sounding like a lot of people I've spoken with recently.
yeah, yeah.
Yep, they're finding their own, I guess, centeredness in what they're asking for.
Right. Because there is if you felt that there was a lot and was almost overwhelming, say 6 months ago, 6 months
Mm-hmm.
from now, you're not going to be able to keep your sanity. So I think it's just a matter of finding that perspective so that as things pop up in front of you, you have the comfort knowing that you've got the choice to say yes, thank you, enter in, or no, thank you, pass by. And
Yeah,
that's because there's going to be so many more uh, choices available.
yeah. I think it's even more realistic now for people thinking that way because they've actually received enough actual examples of that being the
Hmm.
case.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, I actually have opportunities,
Hmm.
and they're trusting them no more than they ever did before, and that's just the credit of the awakening process for all of
Right.
us.
Right. Yeah, and I can see that with just how things have moved with Jack since
Mm,
March,
mm-hmm.
with the law firm, and just seeing, and I can just sit back and look at it and say, wow, this is happening everywhere. And I get the advantage of a front row seat and watching the microcosm there of what something brand new being created in a very different way in a stodgy old system that I know on one hand it's falling apart, but it's
hmm
being replaced by the way that they're doing this very differently, and I see it, and so knowing what I know, that if I'm seeing this in the legal system, then it's the same thing is happening in the financial system and it's happening in the
Yep.
government system. Even though I may not
Yep.
see it in the first row, I may be in the last row in in seeing
Yeah.
some of
Good
these
point.
things. But what I'm seeing in the first row here, I know is happening everywhere else. And so where in the past I thought everything was going to change on December 21st, 2012, and I learned, okay, it's not, it doesn't work that way. But now I see the unfolding, and even though everything did change, everything keeps changing more uh, every moment now. So yeah,
Well, I was I am being prompted right now to share something about the 2012 thing from the Pleiadians if you'd like to hear it.
yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I mean I'm interested in hearing it, so um they're saying they had their own choices as to what timeline to journey forth from,
Hmm.
and there were some visiting this solar system that actually chose a more intense, more like path to destruction type of path.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they went through like the observation of stopping an apocalypse and being a part of sort of an apocalyptic Earth timeline.
Okay.
They didn't know that that there was anything other than the timeline that they were in.
Right.
Essentially, but they have just crossed over here. That they have just come over, and this is new. This is news to me. They have crossed over from that timeline and said, "It was amazing what happened." And those that are sort of, you could call still standing, right? Those who
Of the
basically
Pleiadians.
went from end to end of it,
Right.
are saying that it was an incredible journey, and they have a lot to share with the others around
Mm-hmm.
as to what sort of experiences different. They're different apocalyptic timelines they came from, but essentially they're sort of like popping up here, saying we were there,
Mm-hmm.
and we've basically come over here to let you know a little bit what happened and how that went.
Okay.
Essentially, the enlightenment is done at this point. The only difference is very few people took it.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very few people chose that path. And so that's why it turned into an apparatus of it looking like lots of people died. The dying wasn't about people dying. It was just those were the people that chose not to do it that way.
Right. Right.
And so those who survived saw them as dying. Right?
Yes.
So in the end, most of the timelines basically only look at about 1 million people basically getting to ascended levels that we know.
Oh, okay.
That's like the average count I'm getting.
Right.
Average count of the different types of apocalypses that occurred. And there's some where it's still going on, but most of them concluded up to this point. And they're showing up now and sharing those sorts of experiences, not in a let's try to make this happen sort of thing because we know it's going to work if we make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
More along the lines of they observed it more than they could be a part of it. Right? So they're like just like talking like about a television show.
Right.
This is what happened on the television show. And so what we thought of and what's being understood now is what we thought of as a converging of timelines into just one timeline.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of that is it converged on your timeline. The convergence of all timelines is the awareness that you're at the center of all of them in the first place.
Right.
And what could be considered, oh my God, things are going to change and transform here, and end of days coming, is that place where you start to take a more critical view of yourself and say, what am I going to do with the last of my days? You see, what am I going to do when the apocalypse comes? And so it led to a lot of critical thought for many that did choose the dramatic route.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they're saying is what they've observed about those who have chosen the dramatic. They've come back, and that energy has spouted into all levels of humanity now because they have soul relationships, as in soul groups and whatnot.
Right.
And a lot of people now feel it within themselves that they're going to go and do that path. That they're going to do sort of like the path of war. Because they're like, hey, it worked. Hey, it worked. You know what? I'm going to do it. I'm brave enough. I'm going to do it.
Wow.
So they're readdressing that. And they're saying people like Michael have heard that.
Yeah.
There's many that are going the intense route, knowing that it is safe to a degree.
Wow.
So, it's as if we're revisiting what could have been to know more the nature of how it operates, and to know that all choices lead to precisely where you're asking to be. For me, as I'm looking at this, I realize that my balance, being in balance, the balance that I choose to portray and to exercise and to discover and to perfect,
Right.
as I move forward, that's kind of my motto, is balance.
Mm-hmm.
Is really just the pace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who am I to say that someone is being reckless? They may be able to balance that, and all that I observe is just, oh my God, that looks owie, from my perspective.
Right.
Yet for theirs, they're like rock and roll, man. You know, they got it. And so that's the place where I can see this now, knowing that it may look discordant for me because that's not my pace.
Right.
You know, and so that's for me to understand that I really cannot say what the best pace is at all.
Exactly.
You know,
Yep.
I basically, as people show up in my field and want to know things, I'll share just what's working for me. And I'll see a lot of people in similar circumstances as me as well, I figure, or ones that can relate.
Well, and I've done a lot of that in the past, where you try to I get somebody who asks me a question about what's going on, and I try to give some kind of explanation based on things I've read or things I've heard other people say that I may agree with, or I may get what they were going for and all of that. Yet it's still their ideas, and it's still them describing their journey. Even
Yes.
though they may be describing it as our journey, it is really only their journey.
Yes.
And I mean, you think back to when Drake was all the rage, and
Yes.
and and I listened to him for a little while, and I like, wow, this is fascinating, this is fascinating, this is fascinating. And then finally, after another week goes by or 2 weeks go by, and I'm like, no, this guy, this has nothing for me. And I move,
Yep.
I leave that path, and I rode I rode that horse for a little while, and then got off. Now, yes, now when somebody asks me a question about it, basically I'm like, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm really comfortable with that. And when something crosses my path, I just deal with it as that at that moment, and I'm not moving forward too fast, and I'm not moving backwards and reliving all those experiences. And and that's where I'm finding myself right now.
Yes.
And becoming more comfortable with it.
They want Pleiadians sharing what they've gathered is a very useful,
yeah, I'm curious,
easy to handle alignment towards timelines.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know what they're going to say. It's one Pleiadian actually doing a lot of the delivering of this. Ekotai is one that I've known. He's saying,
thank you,
that. What's that?
I said thank you, Ekotai.
Yes. He's nodding. He's saying if you look to the future and it makes you very happy, that is worth looking at. If you look at the future and you're unsure, then ease off just the point where you look at it and say, that would be really nice. And it would be wonderful to see how it comes about. Not knowing exactly what twist is still to be given to it that I don't know about.
Mm.
So any projections to the future are really, when your heart is in it, then you connect with it and you direct your focus and allow you to go there. But there is such thing as too much focus, because you can be placing more energy on grounding something to become solid, when the only things that are really solid are right now. Right now is the most solid forms. And so you can give yourself something like too much attention for a projection when, from one perspective, you're not taking one big leap to there. You still take life in steps. You still walk about with two legs, taking step by step by step.
Right.
So to find your heart's alignment is rare. To basically point your finger to the sky or to the stars and say, that is where I'm going for the next 1,000 years, is very rare to be that calibrated.
Mm-hmm.
So observe your calibration to your heart and do the step by step, because that is much easier to find yourself.
Yes.
So projections far off tend to be written anyways, and anything that's grounded needs to be ungrounded for many people, and the ungrounding involves understanding why it is not to be so. So that is how many of those who survived the apocalypse operated. They lived moment to moment survival.
Mm-hmm.
And everything was possible. Everything's possible. They could not see a way out of it. There was no point. Those projections they saw that were a way out, they were, they're basically cut down.
Right.
And the purpose involved finding themselves. The apocalyptic experiences help people find themselves, only because they literally only could operate moment to moment. Now, there is a similar story like this, and that is of those who went to war in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
And just wanting to live one more minute. There were essentially great numbers of miracles untold that were observed by people off planet. These miracles really, really affected people up there observing them. Not the tragedy, but the sheer brilliance of being in the moment. Within lighter dimensions, with less coalesced density of energy, you sometimes forget that how things actually occur. Similar to how we've forgotten, only for them it's more along taking it for granted.
Yeah.
A little bit like taking it for granted that you have a rich, grandfather and you can buy anything you ever needed, and you forget exactly how that occurs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a little bit what the lighter dimensions are like. They don't have suffering so much as what we do, which is the forgetting is the suffering.
Right.
The disconnection is the suffering. That was a lot of my perspective, but it was initiated by Ekotai.
Okay.
there were a couple people that went to these apocalyptic timelines and went, instead of showing up now, they left for a different time. They actually time traveled into the past. And the ones that decided to time travel in the past were the ones that decided that they wanted to try and do it over again, differently.
Like
try to improve the run.
Getting on the roller coaster again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not about... they said that they were doing this to basically wake people up. That they were doing this so that perspective was gained. The perspective was not to do anything but make people want to say, I have a greater choice than what can be. More in the department of self-empowerment. On one level, the attempt was to work with the survival mechanism of the body and the resistance of the ego to be destroyed. And basically catalyze an ego approach to survival that forced the ego to remove itself from the picture so that survival was possible. It's akin to a computer program or a computer stepping aside to let someone with a heart and a human brain take over the automation. Remove the automation of life. And act consciously from the heart. So the time travelers, the way that they travel through time is because they already had that ability, but they had to observe the direction of the chaos. Now, they're not explaining it in such a way where the chaos is omitted. The chaos timelines continue to exist.
Right.
But the reasoning for going back and sharing what they've observed is because there are infinite loops of it. And as each loop continues and comes back around, the entire collective is reassured of this period in time as enlightenment setting. It's almost like die in every horrible way that you can before you decide that it's not worth it. Something to that effect, like a video game.
Yeah, wasn't there just a Tom Cruise movie that he had to die every day in order to come back? And I never saw the movie.
No, I never saw the movie. I think I saw a trailer.
I saw a trailer for it. Yeah, it was like an Ultimate Soldier or something.
That's very curious. But yes, it's. I don't know how similar it is to that. But it's just one strategy.
Yes.
It's not, not necessarily something for us. But there is a little bit of collaboration going on with those that were picked up. Those that were picked up that I mentioned about a month ago or so.
Something about 11,000 people. I
yes.
didn't hear the full story on that.
Well, the 11,000 were those in a position of near suicidal anguish,
Okay.
of working and being pressured to create a cabal structure that they don't want to be a part of any longer.
Ah, I see. Okay.
So it's really the ones in the most pain that the Pleiadians had empathy to support.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the invitation was very large, but only the most intense ones, or those who were brave enough, did this. Because, for one, they were not going to bring their families.
Right.
If they had families.
That was very brave.
And so on several conversational levels, the Pleiadians are holding the karmic cycle for those beings.
Mm-hmm.
They're holding a responsibility as they first understood. Yet that's how they wanted to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to put their energy in the most visceral way of almost any of those that are near us right now.
Right.
So they put a lot of visceral intention into this, and although it made them a bit unpopular because now it's like they have refugees or something to the other groups in our solar system right now, those refugees are really breaking down how everything is working.
Mm-hmm.
They're really spilling a lot of data, and they've accepted their place right now. They know that they could only come back if people here invite them to come back. The same reason why the Pleiadians can only come if they're invited. Like they can't.
Ekotai, you're invited.
No, you can't do that. It makes me tickle. Oh man. Okay. He's he's like a Santa Claus laugh.
I like Santa Claus.
He's like sort of like his whole body shakes so much. He's saying he'll be here.
Okay.
He's got a couple stories to tell of dreams that he's had.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, he literally sees the ship that they're in as becoming a visible moon for Earth.
Oh.
A visible satellite.
The ship that Ekotai's in, or that the refugees?
The ship
are?
that Ekotai's in and the refugees.
Oh, they're together. Okay.
The Pleiadians that I speak with are those in this large spherical Death Star type ship. Okay. Except it doesn't have an outer exterior like that. The outer exterior looks like you're looking at like a forest planet.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's like a miniature forest planet.
Ooh.
But it's most of what's going on is on the interior.
Mm-hmm.
So in the interior, it's all corridors and things. But yeah, their ship is not in a visible resonance. Mm-hmm. It should actually be able to be seen with the slow motion cameras.
Oh, okay.
That collect a lot of wavelengths of light that normally don't appear. Mm-hmm. It should be able to be caught by that. And overexposures, camera overexposures.
Okay.
It is. I don't know how to explain it, but if Jupiter were the distance, it would be about 75% of the way to Jupiter.
Oh, wow.
and it would be the size of about 1/8 the size of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Something around 1/7 to 1/8. And it doesn't really move around much. So that's telling me that we could actually get a coordinate to study.
Right. Is he offering?
Hold on a second. Four to 6 degrees southwest of Alcyon.
Okay.
That range. It is in motion, but not a lot of motion.
It doesn't revolve around the Earth.
No, it doesn't. But
Yeah.
it does travel with the solar system.
Okay. Yeah. So it would have to.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's partially in motion. There are lots of smaller crafts that go from that ship to Earth all the way. There are a lot of Pleiadian ships landing right
Mm-hmm.
now. Pleiadians are walking on Earth. They're not just anybody. They're have very specific arrangements. The arrangements involve getting very close readings of people's emotional states
Mm-hmm.
and reading people's reactions to specific stimuli and information. They don't even do it directly. They just propose information to come up, and then they show up to observe people's reactions to that. And they look like a human. So I'll give you an example.
Okay. I've got an idea, but go ahead.
In a Starbucks, there's a Pleiadian that comes in and gets coffee,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't drink it because he can't handle the coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And he telepathically makes a suggestion after hearing someone have a conversation to sort of steer the conversation to a particular set of thoughts that the conversation goes about. And so the person may begin to talk about it. It's a little bit like suggestion, like the Jedis do,
Right.
like a mind suggestion, and then observes how the conversation organically occurs from across the Starbucks.
Okay.
And then basically his observations are fully recorded on ship, similar to what I'm doing, except it's they're doing it in their direct capacity, and they're doing it in multiple subcultures all around the Earth,
Is this
observing local
collection to understand?
environments and taking readings of local environments, because currently the data they have is extremely topical. It's very broad.
Right.
And they're not looking for people specifically as sort of like poking the local environment to see what their proclivities are. So it's like direct energetic sampling
Mm-hmm.
of sorts. They're not really engaging people at all. Humans, that is.
Okay.
There's only a couple circumstances where that would work, and that's if you are already fairly telepathic. Because in the telepathic or the high ability to empathize, high empathy is also telepathy. The high empathy would be the truth of the conversation. It'd be the only truth or validation you could receive. So if you're telepathic and highly empathic, you know what you're feeling is right. That's the only way to know. It's the only way to not. It's the only way to accept their existence, actually.
Right.
So one of the oh, this is very cool. One of the things they're saying they get asked, like when people happen to come in very close proximity with them, is they're asked, "Where are you from?" Coincidentally.
Interesting.
Where are you from? As if it's like, you look French or something. Like, where I'm trying to put my thumb down and I've seen you somewhere. Where are you from? Currently, those Pleiadians that are here have very minor surgical visible shifts. But yes, they look human.
Okay.
One of the things that is not a common for all Pleiadians is the location of their belly button. Because not all Pleiadians are born in a womb. And not all of them are born through the apparatus of an umbilical cord.
Right.
They can literally be just projected into existence. Those that are here right now most likely have led a more physical existence. But they're also highly trained by the Syrians to be able to operate here without infringement. The Syrians are actually the experts on observing humans without being noticed. There is another, I don't know, there's another stellar group. I can't put my thumb on it. There's another stellar group that does this too. And it's hard to explain, but you remember the old prime directive concept?
Yeah.
It's like they have that, but it's a little bit looser than that, which is, prime directive is something like does not interfere with the with the technological advancement or social advancement of a group of people. Right? Well, their version of prime directive is more along the lines of will not obscure anyone's path to their heart. And to do this, they need to immediately recognize all that they interact with as their mirrors. So when they go down, they're actually working on themselves so carefully. Right? Because when they show up here, it can be a very fearful place for people who are not ready for the intensity of our dramas.
Sure.
So it's really the most like monk of those that come here. And the Syrians know how to do this. The Pleiadians don't do it so well because they empathize so readily. The The Syrians are very easy at isolating their realities and disconnections.
Right.
Syrians are comparatively considered, on the whole, older souls with much more experience
Mm-hmm.
than the Pleiadians, being relatively much younger. One of the things I'm getting for the Pleiadians being younger is that they are a first stage for humans, so that humans can revisit their childhood nature of wanderlust. And their energy patterns here serve that.
Okay.
Because that is an relatively already understood approach to allowing.
Right.
And to acceptance, and to discovery, and to creativity, and to imagination.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So that's why the relatively younger soul Pleiadian pattern is present and invited.
Mm-hmm.
Because many people will rejoin their childhood approach. It's not necessarily for all people. For those who are older souls, they'll follow a more very relatively more intellectual path. Through the more older soul intellectual path, there is more grounding.
Right.
That can be shared and can be described in multiple facets.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
childhood approach is more organic and is not easily explained. So it does not serve as so much grounding, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, I can see both active
Mm-hmm.
in my life.
Your field.
Yeah. Yeah. The intellectual definitely, but it's with having a 5-year-old, getting more back into the play of things.
Mm.
We were at the park today, and it's not something that without a 5-year-old that I would necessarily find myself doing and getting into the playing. But definitely with her, it's a lot of that more so in my life. Yes, I see it.
There is, as you are able to empathize with your child, there is a place of memory, because everyone's been a child, just
Right.
about. And there is revisiting childhood through being a parent,
Mm-hmm.
to a degree. The place is almost held specifically to see if you will reiterate your own programming through your children.
Right.
Because that responsibility for you is your own responsibility with your own programming of yourself that was you growing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Totally.
you're basically reissuing the grounding you once considered served, and facing it again.
Mm-hmm.
That itself can be the importance of the mirror of a child in your life, to get you to take a second look at how you grew up and what programs you still hold that keep you from being a child. It's almost like revisiting what would you do to yourself as a child.
Oh yeah, and it's really interesting. Like
Yeah.
now this week, just being going through that process in my own life down in Miami, and then coming up here and staying with my mom and revisiting where that programming came from, and
Even the origins, yeah.
seeing that programming being pushed at me on a minute by minute basis, and recognize, that's what this whole week is being about. That's why I need Vegas.
Very good.
Uh,
I am. My 5-year-old is unbelievably powerful.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You probably already heard a little bit about her. She really gets what she wants. And I don't mean that like she's like a little devil or she
Right.
cries or she screams or whatever. But she is almost more clever than I imagined a child could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yet
Exactly.
it's natural.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm confused. Well, I have been confused. And on one level I say she's a little brat, she's a little manipulator,
That's Audrey. Yep.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
then on the next level I say it's amazing how powerful children can be till someone tells them not to be that way.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, this child is my teacher.
Yes.
Like really, I thought I knew a thing or two.
Mm-hmm.
But this child is literally my teacher, and it's sometimes very overwhelming for me. It's like I need a timeout from class here.
Totally.
You
Totally.
know?
That's exactly what it is. And I mean, my joke line on it, and it's really just a joke, but it's reality, is that everything with Audrey is a negotiation,
Mm.
and 90% of them I lose, and the other 10% she lets me think I won. Yeah, and it's really the truth, because you will be eating dinner, and
Uh-huh.
and she'll get up off of her chair, and Jack will say, Audrey, did you ask to be excused? And she just looks at him and says, but Daddy, I just wanted to come and give you a hug.
Yeah.
No, it was
Yeah.
not that, but that the mind, it works like that, and she knows where to put that energy. And
Mm.
now,
Mm.
I don't know what your growing up experience was, but back, in my age, if I got up without being excused, I'd probably get the back of a hand across the back of my head.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so you learn through that programming that this is not how it happens. Well, we don't do that, obviously. We chuckle and laugh, and so she gets to explore that more so. And your daughter the same way, that
Mhm.
without having that programming instilled in them like we did, they're able to find new things. And at 5 years old, they're
Mm.
doing this, and at 7, they're going to be even more amazing
Mm.
through that process. And then at 11, and all of that, as long as we don't dip into the bag of tricks that we grew up thinking that's how the world ought to be.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's one more thing I want to share. He actually want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
There is there's something about Chicago right now, or the region. I want to say Michigan, you know, Detroit, Chicago region.
Mm-hmm.
He sees a strange demolition going on. He's saying that there's like a building is imploding. It's like coming down on itself,
Mm-hmm.
but there's flowers all around it. It's like flowers are growing from this rubble,
Mm-hmm.
and he's wondering if you're aware of that pattern, if you're able to see that.
Um, what I would see in the Detroit, Chicago area is Detroit as a city is bankrupt, and it is has already fallen.
Uh-huh.
I read an article just a couple of weeks ago about how vacant land is being now turned into farming, inner city farming land by the
Hmm.
people. Now, Chicago also they are having all kinds of problems with violence. There were over the Fourth of July weekend there were like 28 shootings
Mm-hmm.
and 13 or 14 killings in an 80-hour period,
Mm-hmm.
and Chicago's got a long history of politics irregularities
Mm-hmm.
and
Because of the mob.
because of the mob, the gangsters, and Rahm Emanuel is now the
Mayor.
mayor, from the Clinton administration, and if I believe what I read in some of this alternative stuff, that he's Mossad and he is an Israeli agent or something like that. All of that, I see that kind of implosion, maybe not visible right now, but certainly not too far off in the future. So,
I guess the question he's asking, and maybe this has already been validated, he says it appears that there's controlled demolitions of the way things are,
mhm.
as in it's dissolving itself, like eating itself alive, and yet it opens up to a place where there's going to be flourishing earlier there than in other places in the United States.
Honestly, I think if you look at Miami, that may be the precursor, because I see
Okay.
that happening now. That the growth and the changes from a place that was so um, bad maybe 10, 15 years ago, with the
Mm.
drugs and the immigration problems and the poverty, and it's a city that's coming back and growing now. I Chicago has always been my favorite place in the world. As much as I've traveled,
Mhm.
I love
Mhm.
coming back to Chicago. I love the city, and I think that that's part of why there is that part of it that needs to fall down.
Uh-huh.
But Chicago is the city that grew by growing this country.
Mm.
And,
Mhm.
and you look at the history, when Chicago is where all the railroads came out of that went to
Mhm.
the West Coast.
Yes.
Chicago is everything was shipped to Chicago through the Great Lakes and then moved on trucks and trains to the
Mhm.
rest of the country. That's how the country grew. And it would not surprise me at all to see that
It
kind
is
of
a
flourish.
starting point.
The starting point. You you knock down what is holding humanity back. You knock that part down in Chicago, it will spread from there.
Okay. He's saying this also because he's part of the delivery of those who time traveled. That's a little bit what happened.
Hmm.
It was like Chicago was that region was like the early transition place.
Right.
It was the Northwest.
That's
Uh,
where unions were born. That's where all of that stuff happened here.
yeah, so it was that region there. It was the Northwest. Well, basically all the extreme points of the United
Hmm.
States.
Well, look at
So
okay.
basically the four corners, except it wasn't the Vermont corner. It was instead of like the Vermont corner, it was right there around the Great Lakes. I'm just getting images of the map, so it's not like
Hmm.
necessarily super clear. But that would also mean Florida too, and actually just a certain part of Florida.
Yeah.
It's only a certain. It's only lit up a certain way.